From around the world and hiding in your closet, this is Paranormal 1. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Grasso, and this is a brand new thing I'm trying. We're calling it Paranormal 1. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to end up being, which might give some of you some doubts of why you're even listening to this in the first place. But I do have some plans and hopes and expectations of where it's going to go, and I'm going to try to take kind of an organic look at its growth and see what happens and where things develop. I do know that one thing I want to start trying is, from the very beginning, doing interviews with ghost hunting groups. I know sometimes you can tune into podcasts and you will have some maybe self-serving podcasts by individual groups who want to get out and promote themselves, and that's fine. That's all right. But you also hear interviews of maybe somebody that's more famous in the field, well known, writers, the authors, the TV personalities, scientists, people with long histories in the field. And you know what? That's got its place too, and those things are interesting, and you can learn a lot from those as well. I'm going to take a little more of a grounded approach in the beginning here and try to just talk to the folks out in the field, the ones who are using their own time, their own money, their own resources, and walking into these dark places on Saturday nights and seeing what happens to them. I'm imagining a lot of you listening have been there. A lot of you have done this yourself as far as the investigating goes. And quite honestly, I want to try to gear this towards you, to the people with some more experience and people who have been around, maybe looking to take things to the next level. It's always nice to hear from other people in the field, find out what they're doing, maybe get some ideas, hear what's working, what's not working, maybe apply that to your own situation. If you can do that, fantastic. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm hoping for. And if it's helping you out, of course, spread the word. Get other folks to listen, and if you want to be a part of it yourself, get in contact with me, and we'll try to make this happen. Now, like I said in the beginning, I'm just getting rolling with this thing. I don't know what I'm getting into to some degree. One thing I'm going to do is, as you're probably noticing, at least if you're finding this in the early days, which is, as I record this, it's just before Christmas in 2017. This is going to be a video-based format. So I want to be able to introduce some photos and videos and things like that as the talk goes along. Maybe show some links up on the screen too for you to be able to follow, learn more about the things we're talking about, and just to experience it that way. In these days of unlimited streaming and things like that, I think a lot more people are able to experience media this way as opposed to having to download the podcast. Now, maybe someday in the future you are listening to this as a podcast because I've decided to switch over and do that. Some years ago, I did have another podcast, and it was called the Conover Square Ghost Tours podcast. So named because at the time I was running what is still called Conover Square Ghost Tours out of the town of Oregon, Illinois. I'm imagining, again, at the beginning, most of you listening to this probably know that. I expect a very limited audience in the beginning here, mostly of family and friends, so thanks everybody. And if you are catching on later or somebody referred to you over and it's in the beginning, well, please thank them for sending you over, and I appreciate you listening too. But at any rate, This other podcast I had, not that it was terribly complicated. You sit down, you record, you take out all the ums and stuff like that, and pop it out there. Well, popping it out there isn't real simple as it turns out, at least not the way I was doing it. Maybe it's become easier since then. I don't know. But it did cost some money to get that together and have a hosting service and stuff like that, and you're kind of limited as to what you could do. So I thought, you know what, if I just try this, get it up on YouTube, link into it, at least that's a start. And if I waited until everything was perfect, I'd never start. So I just started, and here's what we have. We're sort of jumping back or maybe forward, depending how we look at it. I think before we get too much in depth as to what's going to happen, I'd like to give you a little backstory as to where I've been, where I'm coming from, and why I'm doing this. In 2011, my wife and I opened a small store in Conover Square, the building that I mentioned before. It used to be a piano factory, opened up in about the 1890s, and it had quite a bit of expansion. And by about early 1970s, they finally shut down as people weren't buying pianos like they were before. And later on, within a few years, a fellow bought it, turned it into a shopping village. So as you walk through, all the buildings have, or the stores rather, look like little shops as you'd walk through some type of a little village. And it was a pretty popular place for a while, and it's had its ups and downs over the last, well, 40 years. But it's still open as a little shopping mall. Well, I say little again, but 120,000 square foot building. So the building has a lot of history to it. It was a big part of the area's economy for the longest time. And again, in Oregon, Illinois, if you're over in the northern Illinois area, it's a pretty cool place to check out. Open 7 days a week. Um, so we moved into this building, and of course, anytime you move into an old building or do something involved with an old building, you hear stories about it, and this happened, that happened, the mysterious sounds, and somebody getting touched, and those types of things. And I've always kind of had an interest in that type of stuff, and so I was listening and cataloging all these stories in my head, and finally decided in 2012 that I'd just sort of start a little walking tour, take people through the building at night, tell them stories about what people had said over the years, and maybe give a little bit of history of the building. A little fun time. And of course, as a business owner in the building, part of what I wanted to do was also feature some of the businesses that are in there. So, for example, we stop in front of a shop and I say, here is the XYZ shop. They report this happening and that happening. And of course, while you're standing there talking, people are looking in the windows, and maybe they decide to come back and bring some business into the building or into that shop over the coming days, weeks, whenever. And it actually went pretty well. We got some activity on the night that I took my very first group through, and they actually made a really nice sizable purchase from our shop. And not that that was really the main intent of it, but as far as talking about some of the other business owners in there, because again, it was a mall, a lot of in fact, all of the businesses, and at the time, I'm thinking there were about a dozen or so, but a lot of small business owners, all local small business owners. I had to kind of sell this to a lot of them that, hey, I'm doing something here that's kind of harmless, and there's no intention of promoting this building as some demon filled location. And I want to bring business in for everybody. This is just another thing of every building has its attractions, and for some people it's coffee, for some people it's a particular antique shop, for others maybe it's a bakery. And some people want to come and experience the ghosts. So whatever brings people in the building, I'm figuring it's good for everybody. Well, that wasn't the attitude that everybody had. There were two business owners in particular who were very set against what I was doing, and a few of the employees within different businesses that sort of gave me some trouble. That's those details are maybe for another time, another story, but um, needless to say, I persevered. The ghost tours lasted, and it's been going on now since 2012. During that time, there was a transition from just the storytelling type of tours to more of an investigation. And a lot of that was due to a group called the Midwest Ghost Society. And they were the first group to come in and really do a thorough investigation of the place. And much to my excitement, they did find some evidence while they were there and got some good recordings and had some really amazing experiences. Um, they've been back more than a dozen times since then in the following years. I've become really good friends with a lot of them, and I've learned a lot from them. It's really been a good experience overall, and I am really glad they were the ones who came in because I've had a chance to meet a lot of other groups since then, and the chemistry just might not have been there, and um, it just things might have changed quite a bit after that. But at any rate, like I said before, um, the tours continued. Any revenues that I made went back into the business, and of course, a part went back into the building owner, either through rent or a proportion of that went in for him to do what he needed to do to the building. Because when you've got a large building and it's 100 plus years old, it takes quite a bit to keep it up and running. And I'm just making a wild guess here, I'd say about half of the square footage or less was actually being rented at any given time. He really needed that extra revenue. It all helped. And since that time, the community has really gotten behind the building. A few private donors have been very generous in trying to bring the building back because it is such an important part of the community, and I'm glad to have at least had a small part in that and to be around to see some of these changes happening. So it's really been a great experience doing it from several aspects. I learned a heck of a lot about ghost hunting. I met a lot of people in different groups from different uh, parts of the region. So Wisconsin, uh, um, Missouri, Iowa, Indiana. From the surrounding states around Illinois, we've had groups coming in and people visiting and seeing the place. And I probably haven't taken as much advantage as I should have in meeting everybody, but hopefully maybe this could be a second chance to do some of that and get back in touch with some of the folks that I had the pleasure to meet over the years and learn from. Now, that being said, it brings up a few different topics, and one of which I'm sure will come up at some point, but I know a lot of people feel kind of weird about the exploitation, let's say, profiting from haunted locations. For me, this was kind of a break even endeavor. It was a hobby that paid for itself, and it was supporting the building, so I really don't feel that badly about it. Um, but, again, maybe that is something for discussion. I know a lot of the naysayers who were in the building at the time I started doing this. It was just a get rich quick scheme. I think I heard that a few times, and um, exploiting the families and things like that. And it wasn't really possible to have, for lack of a better, way to put it, it wasn't really possible to have a rational conversation with some of these folks. So maybe in the future, that's something that could be a topic of discussion. I'd like to hear some thoughts on that. But in addition to that, it really did show me from a business owner standpoint how ghost hunting works, and talking with some of these groups, and some of them stayed overnight in the area. Some did a lot of traveling. We'd meet sometimes, have dinner. I got a really good feel for how a lot of different groups work, and I saw some really cool things. I also met some folks who didn't really strike me as being the best representatives for the paranormal community. Not necessarily that they were destructive or violent or anything like that. On the contrary, most of the people that I met were pretty friendly and respectful, and I really had no complaints about it. However, if I were to pick a group of 5 people out to sit in front of a workshop or some type of a conference and do some speaking, some of these folks would not be my first choices. And for some of them too, they hear a creak. I say, hey, it's probably this or that. I mean, I've been through the building hundreds of times over the last several years. I kind of get a good feeling for what's going on in the place. So when I try to explain what it is, even the seasoned investigators, and seasoned meaning they've been doing it a long time, not necessarily that they're good. Eh, there I said it. Um, some of them would still say, I don't know, it sounded an awful lot like this or that, and hey, that's your thing. If you want to run with that, I can't stop you. But I know from my experience, it's probably the wind or a pipe or whatever the hundreds of things are in this 100-plus-year-old building that could be making noises. So I guess maybe credibility might be one of the issues that um, sort of makes me pause at times when people ask, so what was such and such a group like? So I'm not really doing this to badmouth anybody or to cause any problems with anyone, but it's one of those things. When you're out there in the public, you're meeting people, you're getting access to buildings late at night. There's a certain level of trust you need to maintain. And if you come across as somebody that's maybe a little too eager to find the supernatural in every creek and shadow, mm, it's kind of hard to get behind that person or that group, no matter how nice the people may be. So I've probably said too much about that anyway. Ran into the same problems when I had the Conover Square Ghost Tours podcast. That I'd say, okay, this is going to be a short one, and then 40 minutes later, I'm still talking, which is probably a good signal for me to wrap this up. Uh, my plan is to put them out as soon as I can, as often as I can, but I'm not going to commit to any type of schedule at this point because I still work a 40-hour-a-week day job, and right now they are offering us overtime, so that kind of eats into my free time as well. Yeah, I've got time. It's a matter of priorities, I guess, but you do what you can do. I have one interview that has already been completed. So after this goes out, what you're listening to now, my priority is going to be to sort of do the same treatment on that one. Um, Sort of put it together, add some video, some examples of for the time being, we'll say evidence that they've put together. Nothing against them. I just think the word evidence sometimes is a little strong, but sort of like we talk about full spectrum cameras, and of course people will get into the huge argument that there is no true full spectrum. Okay, whatever. Stuff that sees in the dark. Okay, whatever. we'll see the same thing with evidence right now. it's, um, but again, talking too much, not showing enough stuff. So that's going to get put together. This is going to be a process. I'm going to get through it somehow or another. And I appreciate your feedback. Anything that can help make this better. Over time, yeah, I'd like to get some better equipment to produce these things and maybe get better at editing the video, yada, yada, yada. That stuff will come with time. I'm not too worried about that. Hopefully, a year from now, I'll look back at this thing and laugh and go, oh my gosh, that was so pathetic. But for now, hey, it's what I got. It's the best I'm doing. I'm putting something out. I hope that uh, somebody will appreciate this or at least see enough potential in it to keep going. This, what you're listening to right now, is really just an introduction for what's to come. As I said in the very beginning, it's going to grow, it's going to change. I don't know into what. I don't know how. I've got some ideas in my head of what I'd like to see and what I'd like to happen. But first things first. I appreciate you listening to this, watching it, however you're consuming it, and I hope you'll come back and you will like the Facebook page and follow along as new announcements come up. I want to put stuff up there that's not. If you've already looked at the Facebook page, you've maybe read the little introduction there. But I don't want to put up a picture of a creepy house with a question under it. Would you stay here overnight for $1 million? Yeah, of course we would. That's what we do. Uh, it's not. There's not even a question there. Yeah, we'd stay overnight for $1 million. I don't want to put stuff up there just to drive the traffic. I want to put stuff up there that if you're interested and you're following, and hopefully it'll catch your interest, and you want to weigh in on it. For example, one thing I put up there was, who's somebody that's not on TV, not one of these big time personalities that you feel is contributing to the field right now? An author, a scientist, something like I mentioned before, somebody who's doing some work that is really making the paranormal field a better place to be. Uh, if you got a contribution, you want to throw that in there, fantastic. Yeah, to catch people's attention, I put a picture of Zach Baggins with some crazy hair. Sometimes you need pictures to get eyeballs. But, the Facebook page, it's not a place to be ragging on people or to be picking stuff apart. Look, everybody's got problems with something that somebody else is doing. Let's just try to help each other work through this stuff, build up a network where we can communicate, share ideas, share our thoughts, try to make everything better. If somebody's not doing a good job, that'll come out. If I'm talking to somebody and I don't have a very good opinion of what they're doing, I'm just going to let their words speak for themselves. You can be the judge then. You can hear what you hear and you make a call. If you think they're awesome, great. If you think they're full of it, that's great too. But that'll be up for you to decide. Any new types of equipment, processes, just cool ideas, maybe different ways to stir up activity on an investigation. I want to try to focus on those kinds of things. Come up with stuff that's going to help each other. That's really the focus. As an investigator, what do you want to hear? What do you want to see? What's going to help you? Let's get a focus on that. If you've never done it before, maybe you've toyed around with it, maybe you've been on one of these ghost hunt investigations like I used to do, or it was one of these deals where you pay for a night, you do a little ghost hunt, you go home and go back to work on Monday and say, hey, guess what I did this weekend? If you've done those kind of things and you want to maybe learn a little bit more about it and hear from people who really are out there doing it, then this is a good place too for you to listen. we'll see where things go. We'll see what happens. In the meantime, I appreciate you being along for the ride. If I were to keep talking, I'd probably find another half hour's worth of stuff to talk about. But why don't we stop it right about here? Keep an eye on the Facebook page. That'll be where the notification comes out when the first interview is finally released. And again, I can't give you a time frame on it. As I'm recording this, like I mentioned, just before Christmas, I don't know if it's going to take me 2 days or 2 weeks to get it out. Of course, I'd prefer less time, but we'll see what happens. So when you hear this, I guess you'll know. But keep an eye on the page. That'll be your best place to get information. I do have a web domain set up and a starter page ready, but I really don't have anything to put on it. So until a little more stuff starts happening, don't expect too much on the website, but it's going to be there. And I'm trying to hopefully, as you're watching this, get some information out there about information on how to get in contact with me if you'd like to be a part of things, if you'd like to help this grow and move and change, and maybe give your ideas on what you think would be good, or if you'd like to be a guest, to be interviewed, talk about your group and what you've done. I'd like to hear from you. So this is Mike. I appreciate your time, and until next time, we'll see you in the dark.